Oh my gosh. We have, quite possibly, the best mono white commander ever. Let's take a look at what gift we have been given from Theros Beyond Death. Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here. Let's take a look at Heliod Suncrowned. Heliod Suncrowned is 2 and a white for a 5/5 legendary enchantment creature, God. Heliod is indestructible, and as long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Heliod isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control. 1 and a white, another target creature gains lifelink until end of turn. Now, the reason why Heliod is so powerful is because it is a very good combo with a card called Walking Ballista. I'll go into that combo in detail a little bit later, but you should be aware of it because it's good, and you're going to see it in EDH and probably in Pioneer. Now, what makes this combo so good? Well, I believe it has to do a little bit with the consistency, and we can make our deck more consistent too. I mean, surprisingly consistent for a mono white deck. I mean, usually when you talk about consistency, it's in decks that include black for tutors or blue with that insane card draw. But this deck definitely does have a level of consistency. It's also pretty consistent because half of your combo, Heliod, is sitting in the command zone and is indestructible. And an enchantment most of the time. Oh my gosh. So that level of consistency is huge. White is also very good at disrupting your opponent. And so if you are moving towards a combo, you do have the ability to interrupt them and make sure to protect your combo pretty well in mono white. Then finally, Heliod has a lot of life gain synergies on it, and white is also pretty good at life gain. So maybe we're not all in on combo, maybe we have a little bit of life gain going on to make sure that this deck has some depth to it. And finally, white is also good at beating down. Heliod gives some +1/+1 counters, so maybe we lean a little bit more aggressive to make sure that our opponents need to respect our board along with respecting our combo. Well, the first thing we have to do is talk about this combo, and that means we need to start talking about Walking Ballista. XX for a 0/0 artifact creature construct. Walking Ballista enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista, or remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is a pretty ubiquitous card, kind of expensive because, well, it is so good. So it's not like we're just including some random card in this deck. Walking Ballista could belong in a lot of EDH decks. Well, what makes this combo with Heliod so well? Well, if we have Heliod on the battlefield, all we need to do is play Walking Ballista for 4 mana. That means it enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Then you need to activate Heliod, giving your Walking Ballista lifelink. And that means that whenever you remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista to shoot something or deal 1 damage to something, you will also be gaining a life. So, Walking Ballista has 2 counters on it, it has lifelink, you remove a counter to shoot something, and you deal 1 damage and you also gain a life. Heliod sees it gaining a life and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. You now get another +1/+1 counter because we just gained a life. You put that counter on Walking Ballista and suddenly you're back to 2 counters. You can see how this gets going. Shoot something, gain a life, Heliod gives the counter back. Shoot something, gain a life, Heliod gives the counter back. And then suddenly you're machine gunning everyone and you have won yourself a game of Commander. So Heliod and Walking Ballista is a really strong combination, but there is a level of consistency that you can find in this deck. And I particularly like my bros from Eos, Ranger Captain of Eos and Ranger of Eos. Both of them can fetch up creatures with converted mana cost 1 or less. Walking Ballista has a converted mana cost of 0 because of those X in its casting cost. Ranger Captain of Eos also has this amazing ability. At the very end it says, sacrifice Ranger Captain of Eos, your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. That is the disruption I talked about. So this is like a 2-for-1 in here. You play Ranger Captain of Eos, and then it fetches your Walking Ballista. Then you sacrifice Ranger Captain of Eos during your turn so that when you go off, your opponents have very limited ways of interacting with you. It's great. It's really good. And these cards can grab so many different cards from your deck. Let's take a look at 2 more types of tutor that you can kind of have in this mono white deck. Militia Bugler can go 4 deep and get a creature with power 2 or less. Again, this is hitting creatures like Walking Ballista that have a power of 0 when you look at them in your library. You can also get Enlightened Tutor, and that can put Walking Ballista or any artifact or enchantment on top of your library. And so we can see how these types of tutors that are a little bit narrow really fit Walking Ballista extremely well. All of these cards can also fetch up a Hangerback Walker. Hangerback Walker, although doesn't combo quite like Walking Ballista, can be very strong. You can gain some life and then start placing +1/+1 counters on it, giving you Thopters later on in the game. I mean, that's a pretty strong interaction. You can also go get some more disruption pieces or consistency pieces like Giver of Runes, Mother of Runes, those provide protection. Weathered Wayfarer can get you a utility land. There are some utility lands that can help you recycle a Walking Ballista that end up in the graveyard. You can also just plain old beat down with cards like Mikaeus the Lunarch that synergizes with +1/+1 counters really well and grows your entire team, or smash in with a Serra Ascendant. Both of these cost 1 CMC and can be found by those Eos dudes. And then finally, we can synergize with the life gain. These Soul Sisters, Soul Warded and Soul's Attendant, can be found with all of these mechanics, and they synergize with Heliod really well. Suddenly, whenever we play any creatures, we're gaining little bits of life and we're placing +1/+1 counters. Now you don't necessarily need the Walking Ballista to be a huge threat. Let's say we have a few of these little dudes on the battlefield, and if your opponents play any sort of creatures, then suddenly you have a very sizable board, and you can actually pressure opponents outside of the combo. That's very good because you're attacking on multiple levels. In fact, gaining life is so good, we have a few more creatures that help us out with it. Suture Priest, Daxos Blessed by Sun, and Auriok Champion will all gain us life, and hopefully, with Heliod, put a lot of +1/+1 counters on different creatures. And then finally, Sunscorch Regent does it both. It gains life and gives itself +1/+1 counters. So we can see in a deck like this, we have the combo, we have some consistency, but also we have a lot of life gain. And so we can lean into this life gain by finding a lot of life gain payoffs. Our commander is its own life gain payoff. Throw counters around whenever we gain life, and we're going to be gaining a lot of life. We can measure the power level of Heliod's Suncrown by comparing it to a card like Archangel of Thune. Archangel of Thune, whenever you gain life, puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Heliod Suncrowned only lets you choose one creature to get a +1/+1 counter. So we can see the disparity of power level there. But Heliod just happens to combine so well with Walking Ballista that it's going to be very, very good in this deck. And so the raw power level isn't there necessarily, but the combo potential is so sweet. And we can still use those +1/+1 counters. We can still use that lifelink. We can still crack in for 5. Finally, Angel of Vitality gains us a little bit of additional life and also can be a pretty good early beater. Speaking of dealing damage, Life Gain can do a lot of damage on an Ajani's Pridemate or Ajani's Strength of the Pride that brings a Pridemate with it. A lot of these creatures can get really, really big with all the life gain we have, but we can also go wide. Whenever we gain life, we can make a horse with Crested Sunmare, we can make some soldier boys with Regna the Redeemer, or we can make angels with Resplendent Angel, and also Angelic Accord. We can do this on everyone's turn too, so if we're gaining life on our opponent's turns, then suddenly we can be making 3 or 4 horses a turn, or a couple angels every turn, and that's something that can be game winning. Finally, there's some more payoffs when it comes to card draw. White struggles in a lot of ways, but it really struggles with card draw. But luckily the card draw synergizes with lifelink pretty well. We have Dawn of Hope. Whenever we gain a life, pay 2, draw a card. I'm going to be drawing a few cards with Dawn of Hope. And then we have Well of Lost Dreams. Whenever we gain life, we can pay some mana and draw that many cards. There's going to be a lot of life gain in this deck, and so hopefully we have the mana to be able to draw a lot of cards. We'll talk about the mana issues White has in a little bit. But I think my favorite way to use life gain is to directly weaponize it. Aetherflux Reservoir. We get above 50 life and suddenly we just have this huge ether laser that's being pointed at our opponents, where at any point in time we can just say, pay 50 life, deal 50 damage, you're dead. That is definitely a huge deterrent and really a reasonable way to win this game. Okay, let's talk about ways to round out this strategy. I have a feeling that we have the combo, we know what that is. We have some of the consistency and some of the disruption, which could be really good. And then we have some life gain synergies. Well, what can support that? Well, the first thing that can support that is some protection. Selfless Spirit and Teferi's Protection are very good at protecting your board, because we are going to need to commit stuff to the board. We're going to have to play those 1/1s. And those 1/1s, when they work with a lot of other creatures, when they work with your commander, can give you a huge advantage. But late in the game, if you just pull a Soul Sister off the top, it's not great. Okay, so we definitely want to protect our board. Selfless Spirit can make everything indestructible. It can also make our Hangerback Walker indestructible if we need to protect it during the turn we combo off. Teferi's Protection can protect our entire board, protect ourselves. It's also incredibly expensive right now, so hopefully this guy gets a reprint pretty soon, and then we can include it in a lot of different decks. I already mentioned Ranger Captain of Eos and his ability to make sure your opponents can't play non-creature spells during your turn, but I also like Grand Abolisher. Just disrupting your opponent, making sure that they can't really interact with you is going to make them so scared, because they have to respect your combo win. Now, mana can definitely be an issue in mono white, and so I want to make sure to pay particularly close attention to it. Knight of the White Orchid is solid. Same thing goes for Core Cartographer, which is just a mediocre Solemn Simulacrum in white. But the real thing I want to talk about is Legion's Landing. This is a great ramp card in mono white. Ramp card, you say? I thought that this just made an incidental 1/1 with lifelink that is pretty useless in Commander. Well, yeah. I do like the 1/1. I like the ability to have lifelink on there. I like stacking tokens on it, or +1/+1 counters on it. It's very good. But I really like the ability to just attack with 3 creatures and then ramp yourself a land. Because that's all it takes to flip Legion's Landing. And so that's really surprisingly good in white, where ramp is really, really limited. And so I've been including Legion's Landing in all of my creature-based white decks, because I just find that sometimes when I have a few free attacks in the mid-game, I can ramp from 6 to 7, just poof, out of nowhere. This deck can combo, but it can also attack. And so finding ways to open up lines of attack so that your opponents aren't just constantly fixated on that combo can be really, really good. Authority of the Consuls, Blind Obedience, and Thalia Heretic Cathar. All of these have your opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Some of them give you some life. I particularly like Thalia having non-basic lands enter the battlefield tapped. I think that's very good. But most importantly, this slows your opponent down. This is another level of disruption. So your opponents feel a turn, or maybe with Thalia, if their lands are entering tapped, a turn or 2 behind. See, it's very strong in aggressive decks to put your opponent on the back foot, because then they feel compelled to commit stuff to the board, to maybe board wipe. And that's when you can land your Walking Ballista and just kind of win the game. And so these cards that provide tempo advantage and some disruption can be very, very strong in this strategy. If your opponent's creatures are entering the battlefield tapped, then you can just go wide with incidental advantage like Oketra's Monument and God Eternal Oketra. You can just play your disruptive creatures like Thalia or an Aven Mind Sensor or even a Soul Sister, and suddenly you have a huge board, and maybe a board with 4/4s? Yeah, that's something that your opponents can't ignore, so they have to deal with what's in front of them, and then always they're feeling the threat of the combo in the back of their mind. The combo is the solid way to win this game, and so maybe if we're going all in on the combo, we just go with Hate Bears and we just go with Tutors. But I kind of like this life gain synergy, and so I think I'd want to include my favorite way in life gain decks to go wide, and that's Stormherd. It's a herd of Pegasuses. They're like a Winnie of Death from the skies. 10 CMC, but you get a number of 1/1s equal to your life. Regularly, you're gonna have like 60 life, and you're like 60 horsies that fly. Yes. I really like Stormherd a lot. But again, you're not even guaranteed to get up to 10 mana because white is so poor at ramping. So I think that this could be a balance to how powerful the combo element is. But if you leave Stormherd out, I think that you'd probably have a higher win percentage. But I'm not. I'm leaving it in. I'm leaving it in my version of this deck. If you want to split the difference, Finale of Glory can let you go wide, and so in the late game, you can have a board presence from a single card, but then also, if you really get into the late game, you can just destroy people with huge angels. All right, let's talk about the play pattern for this deck. You're going to be on the board relatively early because remember, we have a lot of 1-drops in this deck. We have the Ranger Captain of Eos and the Ranger of Eos package. And so very often you'll play a 1-drop on turn 1. On turn 2, maybe you play an Auriok Champion or a Grand Abolisher or a Selfless Spirit, some other way to impact the board. On turn 3, when other people are ramping, you can play your general from the command zone, and suddenly people are afraid because you can start distributing +1/+1 counters, making your early drops more and more significant. And now is when your opponents start feeling like they have to hold something back. Maybe they hold up counterspells. Maybe they hold up some interaction because Walking Ballista can come down out of nowhere and win the game. That's where you can start pushing your creature advantage. Maybe grow some creatures bigger and bigger. Put in a Johnny Pridemate on the battlefield that people have to deal with. Maybe put a God Eternal Oketra on the battlefield and start just busting out 4/4s and going super wide. Your opponents are going to need to eventually interact, and you're going to draw disruption because the disruption is key for then landing that big Walking Ballista and then shooting your opponents, and they can't do anything about it because you've just closed out the game in mono white. This has been Heliod, the Sun-Crowned mono white combo aggro awesome deck. Thank you so much for watching this. I want to thank Cool Stuff Inc. because they support the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And I want to thank all of my patrons out there. Thank you so much, patrons, for supporting me. And thank you for watching this video, for liking it, for commenting down below. Speaking of comments, this is a pretty good card for mono white, right? I mean, this has been kind of what we've been asking for. Something that's got some push to it. You know what I mean? So what other kind of stuff do you want to see out of mono white in the new year? All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all really soon. Bye-bye.